Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's installment of Let's Talk Horses. You will notice that the person I have on today was on the podcast recently. We covered so much, and I knew straight away when we started chatting that we would need to have you on again. So thank you for joining us for your second installment of Let's Talk Horses, Miss Alex Nicol.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me on again. It's awesome to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, my friend. Thank you. And we were just talking off air a little bit as well, because I don't know how you guys are all doing in the world. I don't even know when hopefully I think this episode goes to air this week. So just in a few days. So maybe it's relevant if you're listening to this and your world is a little bit strange. Because I don't know, we were just talking off air about things that are up in our world at the moment. And, Alex, you've got some stuff going on with your body and different things happening with the people around you. And I'm sort of like, some days I'm just like, who even am I right now? Like when your world becomes so fragmented that you sort of like, do I try and put the pieces back together or do I just leave it and see what shows up? So I love Dain here has a tool, I think in his Tour of Consciousness, which is really cool. It's a free thing he does on YouTube. Where he did an episode on just take two more steps or take another step or something. And I remember I was coming home from what was a 7-day back then that are now 6-day events in Costa Rica. And I was in LA just on like a layover. And I listened to this Tour of Consciousness and I was in this sort of energy now. This is an energy for me that comes up quite regularly when there's a huge amount of change going on, either in the world or in my life. And it was this just take two more steps or take another step. And ever since, this was years ago, and every time this energy comes up now, I'm like, I remember that Tour of Consciousness and I'm like, Sarah, you got this. You just got to at whatever pace, even if it's not directly forward, even if the steps are a little bit sideways, just take another step or two and
exactly. Just take another step.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about our horses. But anyway, I want to start with the thing that we were going to talk about for this podcast, which is your amazing horse, Rosie Rocket, which I think is the best name. So tell us, start from the beginning, start from somewhere. Tell us a little bit about you and this amazing horse.
Thank you so much. I love the beginning because it's like a story that I've never told anyone, but I can tell you, Sarah. So I'd done a lot of access and I'd done some conscious horse, conscious rider classes with Gary, and he had shown me that I could talk to the horses. And then he said, okay, how about we take what you love and you start turning it into money? And I was like, woohoo. And so I called one of my friends and asked her where would be a good place to start. And she was like, why don't you go and see this guy, Alan Young? And I was like, okay. And off I went. And I went out to one of the paddocks with him where all his yearlings were. And there was probably about 5 yearlings in the paddock together. And I just stood there and I looked at the horses and I just said to myself, okay, who would like to be a super racehorse? And there was one yearling that came out of the herd and walked straight up to the gate and like basically just put her head right next to me. And I was like, okay, awesome. And that was Rosie. And I wanted to give her a fast name. So we called her Rosie Rocket. And I took her home on a 3-year lease and broke her in and did all the legwork with her, leading her off one of my other horses up in the hills in Gidgegannup. And she was just the most incredible horse and went on to win 8 races in a season. She broke the West Australian record and won $464,000. She was absolutely incredible. And like everyone just had so much fun when we went to the races to watch her. It was absolutely awesome. And I just, loved the journey with her so much. It was very exciting.
So let's just backtrack for one moment because, I think hopefully by now this podcast has a bit of a mix of listeners. Obviously, those people who know about access consciousness, conscious horse, conscious rider, who have done some classes, maybe know a little bit about the tools and what we explore in access. But then I'm hoping there's also some people starting to join the podcast that don't necessarily know that. And I sort of think it doesn't really matter. Like consciousness is consciousness, no matter how you approach it or what it is for you. I think there's a lot of people in this world, that are exploring consciousness in their own version of what that is. And people might call it different things. They might not call it anything. It might just be who they are naturally as a person, wanting to have access to more beyond this reality. So when you mentioned there that you were in a class with Gary and he sort of, made you aware of your capacity with talking to horses, like, I feel like there's a lot of people out there that have these capacities with horses, with animals, with nature. But just looking at horses right now, like, what does that look like to you to be able to talk to horses? Like, do you have any other examples or anything, or like, where did you become aware that you could do this? Or
Cool. Okay, so probably the first interaction between Gary and I was when he said that I was psychic, and I've never had so much resistance come up in my universe to anything. I was just like, what the fuck are you talking? Oh, excuse my French. What are you talking about? Like, I was absolutely horrified that he would think that of me. So I obviously had many judgments back then. After I got over that initial shock, like, he must have said it to me in a way that it got into my being somehow, because then I started to work it out, and then I was like, oh, okay, this isn't as crazy woo-woo as I thought, and everything does communicate energetically and telepathically. And if you just make yourself quiet enough, you can actually listen to the horses. And I would say that everybody has a different way of doing it, and every horse has a different way of communicating to people. They definitely communicate in the same way to themselves. But there is so much energetic communication going on in the world. And if you just be quiet enough and ask questions, then you can start to pick up on what's going on. And so it was a muscle that I built over many years, starting with that first time when Gary said to me that I was psychic, and I was like, what the hell?
Wow.
So he kind of just gave me that little wedgie, and the door opened a crack. And then over the course of years, I just built that muscle and built it. And like, now I'll kick the door down to get to the information that I need.
Wow. And it's so interesting. It's so interesting because I think, what you were saying about as soon as someone hears psychic, like, it automatically conjures this, like you said, like this crystal ball, like this woo-woo sort of thing where it's, but then you really broke it down and simplified it, because it's actually just the language of energy. Like, it's the thing that like, I don't know how you see it, but for me, it's like, actually everyone that's willing to have that capacity, that, call it psychic, call it whatever you want, we actually all have access to that. It's just that most of us are never willing to kind of make it that easy on ourselves or something. Like, your mic's gone weird again. I can't hear you. Maybe just unplug it. Just take it out. Will it work without it plugged in at all? No, can't hear you. Now it's crackly. Now you're muted. No, you've got to, maybe you do have to have something plugged in. Maybe just try again. Okay, say something. Oh, no, it says you're muted. Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Say something. Okay, good. Yeah. So looking at that thing of like psychic, like, is there anything else that, and I've got more questions, but is there anything else you want to say when people, like, you had that resistance, and I've also heard in Access a lot, what if the thing you think is wrong about you is what's strong about you? It's kind of like that energy as well, where if someone says to you, oh, do you realize how psychic you are, or you're a psychic, straight away you're like, oh, people are going to think I'm strange, or I'm like a weirdo or something like that. But like, is it?
I was just like floating along with so many judgments of psychic and like weirdos and all that stuff,
Yep.
that I didn't even know how much judgment I had of it. Like, it was wild how much judgment I had basically of myself, because yeah, we are all interacting in this energetic world, and all of us have the ability to recognize the energy and see what's going on. And yet there I was floating along with just so much judgment. It's wild to think about how I was. Yeah. And then
so
you just start practicing and
keep going, because this is kind of what I was going to ask you.
I would say one of the most important things is to not be upset. Like, you've got to be an allowance of not getting an answer, and then just trust that the answer will eventually come. So the horse may not tell you what it is that day, but it will eventually come, and then you'll go, oh, that's what that is. So when you're just starting, you've got to just ask the question, and then not, like, just be an allowance of not getting an answer, and then the answers come more and more and more.
Okay, so what sort of questions do you ask? Like, because you mentioned it before as well, you developed this muscle over many years through asking questions. Like, is there specific questions you ask, or it's really just anything based on what the horse is kind of showing you in that moment?
Yeah, like, it depends. If the horse has come to me with someone and there's a problem, then I'll ask the horse what's going on. I think the most simple ones to start with are like, are you okay? Which is a pretty generic one. But then there's ones that involve our safety. Like, I would say the most simple one to start with is it okay if I ride you today? And like 9.5 times out of 10, the horse will say yes. But on that 0.5 out of 10, when it says no, you don't get on it. Like, it would be really dangerous to get on a horse after it's told you no, it doesn't want you to ride it that day.
Wow. And it's so interesting that you say that, because most of the time, based on that, like based on your experience, and I would agree, even if they're kind of like, yeah, like they're kind of like, yeah, like whatever. They're not like, yes, ride me. Like, let's go off into the sunset and make it like this magic, which I think is what we all wish it was like every time we rode our horses. But most of the time they're like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, sure. It's fine. Like, it's interesting then when you say, because most of the time they're on that side, whether it's a strong yes or just like a yeah, whatever sort of yes. But most of the time, 99.5% of the time, that they're on that side. But then when they're not on that side, it's really like not.
Yeah. I think the thing there is that I have exposure to horses that'll say no. So race horses and horses that I'm breaking in, if they're having a bad day for whatever reason, I always ask them, because if you're starting a horse under saddle and it's not going to go well, you want to know before you get on it.
That's very true.
And it doesn't go down well with the horse's owners, because usually you're being paid to deliver a result. But as I've got older, I've just got like really sound in my knowing of what the horse is telling me, and there is no way I would get on a horse when it's saying no clearly. You just need to do something else, change something, and then start again the next day.
And like, imagine, because how many trainers out there also feel that pinch of like, I'm here to deliver a result for the owner. And how often are trainers aware, and I guess even not just the trainers, but the people that ride. I mean, wow, this is so cool, because I wonder, like, even if people had this simple question before they rode a horse, like how fewer quote unquote accidents would happen, because everyone you talk to that's had a bad fall, or even not like a super bad fall off a horse, it tends to really change a lot in their world, and most of it is not for the better. Most of it is like they use it to turn into this whatever, something to stop them, a fear thing, or whatever that is. So wow, imagine if everyone just was willing to ask this question and listen to the answer. Do you think people don't ask it or do you think people
don't know to ask it?
Okay.
Like, I wouldn't have known to ask it if Gary hadn't told me that I needed to start asking the horses questions. So They literally don't know to ask it. And that is one that I tell a lot of my friends, even my friends that wouldn't want to talk about talking to horses. I still tell them that one.
Cool.
So
Cool.
yeah. I've got a
That's
friend who's
amazing.
an incredibly successful jockey, and she knows how to ask that question.
Cool.
So yeah, it's really cool. And you're right, it would change a lot of things. Like if people were going about life from a more conscious place, it would be a very different world.
Yeah. And then so once you're riding a horse, then like there's so many avenues I want to go down here, but let's go this one. So you ask your horse, your breaker, or even your horses that you're riding for pleasure or whatever, like, hey, can we have a ride today? Can I ride you today? And they say yes. Once you're on the horse, then like how much do you then, is it still a constant question like in every moment, or is there a point where you get to, oh, now we're going to do this, like, because this is what needs to happen today, sort of thing?
That's where I go more into feel, and that's something that I encourage, like everyone that I teach, I really encourage them to start feeling what's going on. I can give you a simple example is when someone teaches you whether you're rising on the right diagonal when you're trotting, and they teach you to look down and see if the outside shoulder is back when you're sitting. Like I won't let my students do that. I tell them that they have to feel what diagonal they're on, and that is preparing them for when they need to feel which lead they're cantering on. Wow. So I start to get them to feel what's going on in their body rather than look down. So I like pretty much go into riding from feeling, which has been developed over years. So not everyone can do that straight away, but like as soon as I get on, if I feel my horse's back come up underneath me, I'm kind of like, that's interesting. What's going on here? Or I'll feel them relax and take a deep breath, and I'll go, oh, okay, cool. Let's go.
Okay.
Because they'll always tell you what they're about to do. Like they give you plenty of warning usually.
Right. Yeah. And this is where I love this conversation so much, because it's obviously very much around having a clearer communication with your horse, which is so fucking important. It's like amazing to think that we could have this level of communication with them. But what it also, like the other invaluable lesson in working this muscle and exploring this to this degree is the amount of presence it trains you to have. Because I mean, if you can do this with your horse, like in every moment, what does that, and maybe you've got an example here, and maybe you don't necessarily bring it over into other parts of your world, but I just sort of imagine how much that would start training us to be present with everything. Like everything is giving us this constant feedback, this constant energy, this constant communication with us, but we just ignore or we don't see most of it. Oh, I've lost you again. Whatever you did before, do it again, basically.
All right, have you got me now?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, horses demand that you're present all of the time. All of the time. They can't stand it when you're on the phone, and they want you to be present with them. And when I first started working through that, Gary had said to me that my horse was stopping at a fence because I wasn't present. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that was another moment where my whole universe shifted, because it was like, that can't be right. And what's he talking about? And it was the perfect wedgie, because it was really pissing me off that my horse wasn't jumping the fences for me. So then I had to go away and work that out. And he was absolutely right. Like, you must be present with the horse at all times. They don't like you to be checking your phone. They don't like it when you just drift off into, some other universe in your head. You can guarantee that they're going to spook at something if you've done that. They really demand your presence, and they demand presence with everything, because they're so connected to the earth. So we then have to be connected to everything around us. And like that, for me, that's part of what I love about riding, is that when I'm out in nature with the horse, I'm really happy and I'm really present with everything, compared to like when you're sitting in an office or you're scrolling on your phone. You're not present with what's going on around you. But when you're with the horses demand that presence of you. That's
Wow.
why I love being out there with them.
And when you with the stopping at the fence with jumping, do you remember what you did to change to start to become more present in that moment? In that, because I guess a lot of riders have this especially with horses when it comes to wanting to jump them, that they get to a point at a fence where they just stop or avoid it altogether. Like, what was it that you changed with that?
That's a great question. It was like building another muscle. So it was like building the muscle of communication with animals. I had to also build a muscle of being able to be present. And I had no idea back then that I wasn't present. I didn't even know what presence was.
Yeah.
So it was the start of a journey of learning when to be present.
Wow.
Yeah.
And just highlighting as well, when you were talking then about, the difference, and maybe this is a cool exercise for people to start to practice with, like, well, what is being present? Like, how do I know? Because it's so true. You pick your phone up, right? And you're like scrolling through like whatever. It's almost like your focus becomes like right here. And then everything, like you might hear a few noises but how often have you been on your phone, or has someone else, like say your partner or your friend or something, and you're saying something to them and it's like they don't even hear what you're saying? Like, it's like, and you've got to be like, dude, like, come back to me, get away from, like, I think that's such a cool example to start practicing with. And I mean, you could even start practicing with your phone, like just as a little side project. Get your phone and scroll, but then be present with like 3 or 4 other things at the same time. Because I think, like what you said, when you're out riding a horse in nature, or even like when you're riding a horse sort of anywhere, you're aware of your body, you're aware of the horse, but you're so aware of everything around you, because that's where the horse's awareness is. So it's almost like you become, and you could still be looking at one thing, like you could be looking at the horse's ears or at the horse's body or one tree in the distance, but you've kind of also got this like 360-degree perspective of everything that's going on around you, but energetically.
Yeah, exactly. I heard a great term the other day called forest bathing. It was in a podcast that I was listening to. And she just said that she goes out into nature and she calls it forest bathing. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's like, the symbiosis of our relationship with nature, when you just go out in nature and there's gifting and receiving.
And it's like an immersiveness, like you submerge yourself and you're immersed in it, like you would if you were in a big ocean or a big bath of a bath of water or something, where there's not any part of your body that's not covered in it, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do we want to talk about? I know we started with Rosie, and I'm so glad that she put you on this journey. I mean, we've definitely got to do way more podcasts together. And I'm already like, when we get off air, I want to ask you. I would love to do. I mean, I know you're starting to do lessons and stuff again. Have you ever thought of, or do you do virtual lessons like Zoom or anything like that? Would you offer that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I would love to get equipped to do that. It would, that's like a technical thing that I would have to work out, but I would love
maybe I can be your guinea pig and maybe we can play. I mean, I'm just about to go to Costa Rica for 3 weeks, but when I get back, maybe we can sort something out where I can have, because all I need, and sorry everyone on the podcast, but if you want, I think this is going to be a good segue, because obviously if you also want to have Alex do some virtual stuff with you, and it could be anything. I mean, God, it doesn't even necessarily need to be riding lessons, but I figure if I have a camera that's got quite a wide angle on me where I'm riding, and I've got, my AirPod in, so we can talk to each other and you're watching me and it's close enough. I'm going to explore this, because I think
that would be amazing.
I think there's a lot of skills you have, my love, that need to be explored more and out more in the world. I'm so grateful that I get to chat to you on this podcast. Thank you. And so with Rosie Rocket then, is there any other stories with your time with her, like anything else that she led you down a pathway of discovery with, or anything else that you remember from your years together?
There's so many stories because she was just so incredible, and it was so exciting, and it was so much fun to have everyone involved. Like I would get our bar swap group together, and we would all go off to the races to cheer her on, and we had so much fun.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a really, like, if people are interested in starting to hone their communication skills, like one of the things that Gary pointed out to me is that you can actually ask the horses who's going to win a race.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun to play with. Some people are very good at it, and the horses usually know who's going to win the race. And yeah, if you are playing with the tools of access consciousness, then that is a really great field to play in, because, you know, first you've got to destroy and uncreate all the projections on the favourite, because there's a lot of projections on the favourite, and then you've got to destroy and uncreate all the points of view of the jockeys. That can be a little trickier. But basically the horses always know what's going to go on, and you can have a bit of fun betting.
Wow.
Yeah, it can be really cool, and some people are very good at it.
And something else that came up for me then when you were talking about, because one thing when you've talked about Rosie Rocket these couple of times in this podcast, I've kind of become aware of how many people contributed to her. So obviously she found you through her owner, I guess, or however that worked. But then through finding you, she kind of opened up this whole stream of people willing to contribute to her as well. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, maybe
she brought so much. She brought so much joy and fun to everybody. Alan Young, who was her breeder, he unfortunately passed away, I think, from a heart attack quite a long time ago now. But he, like, I think, you know, I didn't know him well enough before Rosie was successful to say that he was depressed, but I strongly suspect that he was depressed. And
your thing's crackling again. It's an adventurous podcast, this one, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, now unmute. I think whatever you're doing does work to fix it, though. Okay, good.
Good. Yeah, she just brought so much joy to so many people's lives. You know, she got Alan out of the house and going to the races again, and, you know, everybody loved coming to cheer her on, and she fought so hard to win, and she just loved doing it. You know, racing can get a pretty bad rap sometimes from people that are concerned about animal welfare. Well, Rosie just loved it. Absolutely loved it. You can't tell me that she didn't know where the finish line was. She would poke her nose out at the end to win. Like, she was absolutely incredible. And everybody loved coming to see her, and all that excitement of winning. And when she won on Super Saturday, I had to speak to a crowd of 20,000 people at Ascot. So, like, she was just incredible. The things that she got us to do, and the way that she just spread that joy of winning through everyone I knew was really cool.
Yeah. So two things out of that, like with the willingness horses have to receive, like, contribution in that way, because I mean, I don't know if maybe it's just a point of view I have or something, but I see a lot of people do ownership with their horses. Like, it's almost like, you know, and we do it with a lot of things, but it's like, this is my horse. But then you see a horse like her that is so open and willing to receive contribution. Yeah. And in return, she was like, just joy, like pure, sort of reciprocated this energy of, like, just bringing so much joy to people's lives.
Yeah, she was like the epitome of joy as a superpower. Like, she was amazing. Yeah. Her strength was just incredible.
Cool. And I just want to acknowledge from that it all began with that question you asked. Like, it all began with that moment where you asked her, or, you know, you asked the group, a herd of horses, you know, which one of you wants to be, what was your question again?
It was who would like to be a great racehorse?
Like, wow. Okay. I mean, I know we're getting towards the end here, and I'd love to just book another podcast with you again. I think you should just come on every month, basically. But I just want to sort of end this on a little note of, like, the power that is the question sort of thing, like, and where horses so desire to, I don't know, like contribute their superpower to us, like to be
very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I would always ask her to win the race for me. Always. I would be like, "Hi, Rosie. How are you today? We're going to the races. Will you please win this race for me?" I always made it really clear what her job was. Will you please win this race?
And do you think overall every horse has their own version of that? Like,
yes,
you get what
they like to have a job. That's what a lot of people don't understand about horses. They really like to have a job. If that job is to just be a friend and be in a paddock, that's fine. But they really like to have a job. And like when you talk to the old masters of horsemanship, their horses had to do a lot of jobs. Like, for example, a horse would have to go out and work the field on the farm, and then it would also have to play polo, and then it would also like event or show jump at Olympic level. Like they worked hard and they really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
They like having a job.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And so if the listeners out there have horses of their own, or are involved in horses in some way, what if this was your invitation to start asking your horses, like, so what questions can people start to play with? Because, I'd love for people to walk away from this episode, anyone that's willing to explore their psychic capacities with everything, but using horses here is such a good example because they're so willing to communicate with us. So anyone wishing to develop that capacity, and also to form this kind of future strong bond with, well, not bond, but this strong like empowerment of every horse that comes into their lives. Like, what are some questions that we can send people away with? So we started with the one where you said, are you okay? Do you want to be ridden today, or can we ride today, sort of thing? And then as far as like really seeing, because I even think about my horses here, like asking them, how would you approach getting clarity on that job part of your horses?
Yeah. There's horses have such great allowance for us, and they contribute to us so much that I think they would pretty much do any job that we ask them. Every horse is different, and some definitely will have a point of view about not wanting to do something. But really, you just have to start. You just have to start. Like, I'll bring a horse in and tack it up, and then I'll say, is it okay if I ride you today?
Yeah.
That's like pretty standard that I ask that question. But then, like if one of them's hurting or if they seem a bit off, I'll be like, oh, what's going on with you today? And you just, they'll either like look at their foot, or they'll pick it up, or they'll, turn around and look at their tummy. There's so many different ways that they can talk to us about what it is that they would like. There's definitely, like, horses have different ways of communicating with us. Like, there's one that I can hear very easily in English, that he only communicates in that way when it's like really urgent. And then there's others that will like nod or shake their head or look at something, or look at you in a way that what it is that they're saying. So I would say everyone has a different way of receiving that energy and receiving that communication, and every horse does it differently.
Cool. So I would say the big invitation, the big takeaway from this podcast is to get out there and start playing with this stuff and start finding your unique language with horses. Because I assume like some horses would communicate differently with like between two different people based on what the person is willing to hear and receive as well. So
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Cool.
They definitely do.
Cool. I'm excited. I'm like, because I feel like I do talk to my horses. I ask them a lot of questions, but I still get a sense it's a muscle that, like you said, over years we continue to develop this stuff and find new ways to kick that door open. Like you said, way back, you're like, it was a crack and then another crack, and now it's like, boom, I'm just going to boot that thing open and let all of the awareness of the information come through. So cool. So
the way that you said it is exactly the way to do it. You just ask them lots of questions, and you know,
Cool.
like I'll be chatting away to my horses all the time, and then if
Yeah.
someone's there, I'm like, oh, that's right, I'm not supposed to be talking to them in English all the time.
Wow, cool. And what
Yeah.
about when you're not with them? Do you still have a line of communication or some sort of, like, how do you connect with your horses when you're not with them?
I'm always connected to them. That was pointed out to me a long time ago at a conscious horse, conscious rider class. I can ask them how they are. It isn't always accurate with my horses.
Okay.
There's been some times that I haven't been right about what's been going on, but then I can, if I tune into other people's horses, I tend to be more accurate. I'm not sure why, but just, yeah.
Cool. That's such a cool awareness to have, though. So anyway, let's wrap it up there, because that's like well over half an hour now, which is interesting with these podcasts, how quickly it all goes. So thank you so much for being on here again, and I look forward to our next episode. Yeah. Bye, guys.